Hello everyone and Happy New Year! It's David here from Beyond the Kingdoms, and I'm so excited to kick off 2019 with all of you Disney World fans. And since it's the start of a new year, I've decided to take things back to basics for this first tips video of the new year. My top 10 tips for Disney World beginners. If you're heading to the parks here in Orlando for your very first time and you're feeling a little bit overwhelmed, don't worry, I've got you covered. Today's video will provide plenty of great tips on how to plan your first magical vacation. So let's jump right in. Tip number 1, start planning your trip at least a year in advance. I know that it may seem crazy to start booking a vacation so far ahead, but believe me, there are a lot of elements to figure out before a Disney vacation. And with increasing prices across the board, planning at least a year ahead, if not more, will ensure that you get the best possible rate for the time you are visiting. The earlier you book, the sooner you can start deciding restaurants you want to dine at and Fastpass strategies. And if you book an entire package together a year ahead, you can slowly make payments towards your vacation. I personally prefer to book things far in advance that I can cancel or make changes to later on. And I like to pay everything off before I even arrive. So the early bird definitely catches the worm here. Tip number 2, select the right season that works for you and know what to expect with crowds and pricing. Multi-day tickets at Disney World now have a tiered pricing system. This means that the time you choose to visit not only will affect your flight and hotel price, but also your ticket price now. But it's quite simple really. The more popular times to visit are much more expensive, and quieter times are a little bit cheaper. If you're wondering when is the absolute cheapest time to visit, I've got you covered. My top recommendation is actually to visit at this time of year. To be specific, January 2nd to Valentine's Day is the cheapest time based on ticket and hotel prices. The only exception in this time period is Martin Luther King weekend. Locals in Florida like to visit and bring an uptick to crowds and price. This is also my favorite time of year because of the weather. It's not too hot and it doesn't rain a lot. The weather is perfect and comfortable. Your next best choice is from the start of May up until the Friday of Memorial Day weekend. Again, the pricing is pretty good. It's definitely warm, but not quite as scorching hot as July. May is also a unique month in that it's in between all the spring break crowds and the summer influx. The third choice in terms of best pricing is actually between mid-August all the way up into Thanksgiving. The absolute best is the first half of September, being just as inexpensive as January. But there are some warnings with this time of year. First of all, Columbus Day weekend brings a small influx in crowds. Secondly, Epcot on the weekends throughout this time gets very busy with locals hitting up Food and Wine, especially in October. And the weather can be very unpredictable. Late August through September is peak hurricane season, so there's a high chance that you will get rained out. Now, if your budget is not too tight and you've got some wiggle room with the money, you may be curious more about less crowded times to visit. To be honest, the parks are almost always pretty darn busy. However, in my experience, I learned of something that I like to call the post-holiday vacuum effect. I tend to visit Disney a lot right after the 4th of July, which is a pretty busy week to be in the parks. And I've noticed that right after a major holiday, the parks and hotels clear out, especially in this July period, because it's also too hot for the out-of-towners. So if you want to visit during a holiday and you can afford to miss out on some work and school days, definitely consider starting a trip the Monday or Tuesday after a 3-day weekend or a major holiday. Believe me, you'll see a big difference in crowds. Tip number 3, weigh out all of your options on staying on property versus off property. It's really important to manage your expectations on what Disney resorts offer based on the price. The deluxe resorts are beautiful and certainly magical, but the price is pretty steep. One night at the Polynesian will cost you the same, if not more, than a night at the Waldorf Astoria. Deluxe resorts begin at about $400 a night. And if you've traveled the world, you know that at that rate, you can stay at some pretty stunning places. But to be honest, it's unfair to compare Disney to other destinations, because there's nothing quite like it. But a standard room at a deluxe hotel is not too different than a room at a moderate. Just remember that with deluxe resorts, you're truly paying for proximity and access to the parks, and a few more amenities like extra dining options. So don't be afraid to explore all of your options. If you have travel rewards with hotel chains like Hilton Honors or Starwood Hotels, it may be worth seeing your options off-property, especially if you're skeptical about being surrounded by Disney 24/7. But if you really are a die-hard fan and you want to be surrounded by the magic, and you need to stretch your dollar, consider tip number 4. Book a split stay. What does this mean? Okay, so a split stay means you book an entire vacation and opt to spend a few nights at a value or moderate to save some money, and then mid-vacation move to a deluxe resort. You can really split it between any hotels. If you're spending a week at Disney, a resort like the Grand Floridian will get astronomical in price. So why not spend a few nights at a moderate and then sample a taste of the good life halfway through? And an extra bonus here is that Disney will move your bags for you between the hotels at no extra cost. Just tip your bellboys. Tip number 5, definitely create an itinerary. Gone are the days of when you could just show up at Disney and wing it. You need a math degree to figure everything out. So if you want to avoid waiting over an hour to go on Splash Mountain and not be turned away at a fully booked restaurant, you've got to make a plan. Even if you're not a planner, make yourself some sort of skeleton of an itinerary. To be specific, once you've booked your flights and hotel, the itinerary is next, before you make dining and Fastpass reservations. And in this phase, you can decide on how many days to dedicate to each park. In a perfect world, I would give 2 days at Magic Kingdom, 2 at Epcot, 1 at Hollywood Studios, and a full day at Animal Kingdom. Of course, you can change this based on your group's interests, but if you give yourself at least 7 to 10 days, you can easily see everything at Disney World at a good pace and still squeeze in a pool day. Tip number 6, know what restaurants you want to visit 6 months before your trip. When it comes to dining, there is one magic number to remember, 180. 180 days before your trip is when you can book your dining reservations. This means that 12 months before your trip, you want to have that budget, flights, and hotel all figured out. Then in that 12 to 6 month range before you travel, dedicate time to researching restaurants. There are over 100 table service restaurants at Disney World. So give yourself some time to look at menus, read reviews, and look at all the prices well in advance. That way, when 180 days arrive, you're ready to go and start booking. And sticking to dining, let's take a look at tip number 7. Treat yourself and splurge on at least one exciting dining experience. If you're a first-timer and assume that you'll only eat hot dogs and hamburgers, you're definitely wrong. Disney World offers an incredible range of cuisine, so make sure you visit at least one truly unique experience. Obviously, Epcot comes to mind when looking at a wide range of restaurants, so I say try at least one type of cuisine here that you've never experienced before. If you have kids, look at the character meals. It will save time in the parks meeting characters, and it's a rite of passage for many Disney children. Adults looking to enjoy a date night? I say find some money in your budget to splurge on a signature restaurant. I have a new tradition of visiting California Grill for my birthday. And to this day, my husband and I agree that it's the best dining experience for a date night at Disney. Tip number 8, download all of the official Disney apps. I know that Disney's website and tech can be a little glitchy, but honestly, I cannot survive a trip to Disney without them. If technology scares you, it's time to conquer your fears and familiarize yourself with the 3 key apps. First, there's the My Disney Experience app. This one's a biggie. This is where you're going to check your wait times, view your upcoming dining reservations, and Fastpass choices. And quite frankly, the best feature of this app that I can't live without now is the mobile order feature. You can pre-order meals at quick service locations, pay for it on the app, and when you're ready to pick it up, tap on a button. If you hate waiting in lines, this is the feature to use. Next, get the Shop Disney app. This is great if there's an item at a store that you really want to get but it's sold out. Or maybe you find some ears that are cute but want to get it in a different color. If you scan the barcode with this app, it will show you all of the locations of where it's sold and the stock levels. Genius. And finally, the third app to get is Lyft. You can get Uber as well, but Lyft is what you'll use if you want to travel in the new minivans. I know that Disney technology is a big topic, and there's a lot to cover. So stay tuned later this month when I'll have an entire main show dedicated to learning all the Disney tech. Tip number 9. Know your Fastpass preferences 2 months before your trip. After that 180-day mark for your dining, the next phase is Fastpass. If you're staying on Disney property, you can book your Fastpasses 60 days before your trip. Off-property guests can book 30 days before your trip. So, this means use that 6 to 2 month range to research what rides really need Fastpass and which ones don't. That way, when the 60-day window arrives, you have a plan ready to go. Again, it blows my mind when I hear people say that they don't know what Fastpass is. You cannot survive a trip to Disney without this anymore. And again, it's free, so use it. And here's a bonus tip. If you're staying on property, when you hit that 60-day window, you can book Fastpasses for the entire duration of your trip. The same goes for dining reservations at the 180-day mark. So, when you're building that itinerary, put those hard-to-get reservations later in your trip. That way, you have a slight edge over guests staying off-property. I would certainly put rides like Flight of Passage, Seven Dwarfs Mine Train, and Slinky Dog later in your vacation. The same applies if you're hoping to book Be Our Guest restaurant or the new Storybook dining at Wilderness Lodge. Tip number 10, and perhaps the most important but often forgotten. Plan breaks. Many first-timers underestimate the sheer size of Disney World. Remember, the entire property is twice the size of Manhattan. It's huge, and it's hot. Whatever you imagine hot feels like, double it. I see so many out-of-towners completely drained by the intense Florida heat. Even in the winter months, the sun can be very strong. So please don't forget to pack that sunscreen. I personally love to use the Trader Joe's spray sunscreen with SPF 50. Also, bring a refillable water bottle. That way you can stay hydrated. And remember, you can always ask for free ice water at most quick service locations. So there you have it, friends, my top 10 tips for those of you planning your first trip to Walt Disney World. If you want even more specific tips at the 4 theme parks, check out this playlist. In it, you'll find my favorite tips for Magic Kingdom, Epcot, Hollywood Studios, and Animal Kingdom. But that will certainly have to do it for today. Thank you so much for watching. Here's to the start of a new year, and remember, if you can dream it, you can do it.